Hello there. Today I'll discuss about a use case that I got to work upon, that is connecting or initiating a pipeline in Azure Data Factory via Logic Apps using REST API. So today the topics that we would be touching are brief about Logic Apps, ADF, and what is Azure Managed Identity, and then it will follow up with the live demonstration of creating the instance for Logic App, Azure Data Factory, creation of the dummy pipeline, establishing the connectivity based on managed identity, and finally testing it via REST invocation through Logic App. Moving on, now, what are Logic Apps? So, Logic App is a cloud service that is provided by Microsoft Azure, and basically, you can use it to orchestrate tasks, automate, integrate between two services, and for creation of the workflows. It simplifies how you can design, build scalable solutions like app integration, data integration, B2B or B2C. It can be used for integrating services or the endpoints present in on-premise to cloud or within cloud itself. And moving on, what is Azure Data Factory? Azure Data Factory and Logic App both are managed services which are provided by Microsoft Azure. And as we can see, ADF is a cloud based ETL and data integration service. Basically, you can consider it as ETL as a service. And if you want to solve or implement any big data type of or ETL based solution, you can consider Azure Data Factory within cloud. As it also provides integrations with other notebooks like Databricks or HD Insight. You can also have simple connectivity to bring in data from on-premise resources, on-premise SQL Server, or CSV files, and so on. And as we know, this is also a managed cloud service. Moving ahead, what are managed identity, Azure managed identity? So basically, whenever we are building a cloud-based architecture or cloud-based solution, one of the main thing is how to take care of the authentication and authorization and the connectivity between the resources. So this solves the problems. Basically, this is a free service which comes with Azure AD, and this is automatically created for some of the resources which are present in Azure. What we can do is we can use the identity to authenticate any service that supports Azure AD. And in this, we will not be required to store any passwords in Key Vault, and we can have direct connectivity between two resources based and supported via Azure AD. Moving on, we'll be covering the live demonstrations, that is creating a Logic App instance, Data Factory instance, dummy pipeline, establishing identity-based access between ADF and Logic App, REST invocation, and finally testing it. See you on the other side. So here you can see I have a trial subscription on my name. So I'll go ahead and create an Azure Data Factory instance. Data factories. I'll go ahead and create a dummy data factory. I don't have a resource group. I'll create a new one. I'll just give it ADF Logic App GKD. Okay. ADF Logic App ARGKD. Okay. I'll leave the region default to West US. It's okay. Name ADF test instance 01. Select version 2. next, I'll not be covering the Git configuration for today, so we'll just leave it as it is. We'll click review and create. Okay, validation failed. Okay, configure Git later, and then review and create. Let's see. It checks for the validation whether all the inputs are properly corrected and properly filled. Let's wait for it. Maybe I'll fast forward the creation. Yeah, it's passed. So now I'll create. In the meantime, we can go ahead and create Logic App instance. Click on Logic Apps. As we see, deployment is in progress for the Azure Data Factory. The Logic Apps will create a Logic App. Free trial, we have a new resource group in place. We'll select that so that both the resources are within the same resource group. And as we can see, deployment is also succeeded. So we'll look at it a bit later. Let's go ahead and create Logic App instance first. So I'll just write Logic App 01. Okay. I'll leave rest of it as it is. I don't want any tags. I'll just review and create. It's validating as it did for Azure Data Factory. Let's wait until the validation is completed. Maybe I'll fast forward this. Okay, it's completed. Okay, now initialization is in progress. In the meantime, we'll go ahead. Okay, this is the deployment side, and we see that the deployment is in progress. Let's click on the resource group for now. So we see a ADF instance. Let me quickly refresh. Okay. If I click all resources, I see a Data Factory instance that we just created and a Logic App instance as well. Quickly, I'll open Logic App instance. Just explore. Now we have to create a managed identity for it so that we can establish a connectivity between Logic App and Azure Data Factory. So from the left hand side menu, I'll go to settings and identity. By default, if you see, there are two types of identity that can be created: system assigned and user assigned. So I'll go ahead with system assigned as of now. I'll put the status as on. Now what it will do, it will register it with Azure Active Directory. Okay, and once it is registered, Logic App can be granted permission to access resources protected by Azure AD. Do you want to enable? Yes, we want to enable it. Maybe in your organization you might not have a right to create it, but obviously you can raise a snow ticket or a request ticket with NetOps and get this done. Okay, so now we see that there is an object ID created. I'll go back to all resources, select ADF, go to access control. Now I'll try to find resources, that is system assigned managed identity that we just created for Logic App. And as you can see, there are other resources like app service, data factory, function app. These are the other resources which are also covered under Azure managed identity based solution. And You can create a managed identity for all the other resources and manage access as we are going to do now. So I'll go ahead and select Logic App. I'll keep the subscription as free trial. Now I'll try to search the name. Let's see if I get it. Now I get it. Logic App 01 that we created. And we see there are no role assignments, right? So now we have checked that there is no role assignments. What I'll do, I'll add a role assignment now. So now you have to select a role. Now I'll select a contributor role. This is enough for now. I'll go ahead and select Logic App, assign access to Logic App. Subscription is free trial, and by default I see my Logic App instance. So I'll select it, I'll save it. Now this is adding role for accessing Azure Data Factory. And if you can see, now again what we can do, we are in the check access itself. I'll again click this. Now I see that there is a contributor role that is added. So now a Logic App can connect with ADF. I'll go back to all the resources. I'll just open author and monitor. Okay, so this is how the landing page of Azure Data Factory looks. Now you can go ahead and just create a test pipeline. So what I'll do, I'll just create a very simple pipeline. I'll name it as test pipe Logic App. Okay, and quickly what I'll do, I'll go ahead and select general. I'll go to web and give the URL for GitHub. Select get method. Okay, so this is a web activity that I have added, and this is just for testing the connectivity between the Logic App and ADF pipeline, whether I'm able to trigger the pipeline or not. So that's why I've just taken this simple web activity. I'll quickly try to debug it and see whether it's running properly or not. As you can see, it's running as of now, and the status is succeeded. So we are good with this. I'll just publish this as well. Click publish. Okay, so pipeline is published properly. Now what we can do, we can go to all the resources. We just open the ADF on one of the tabs, and Logic App as well in one of the tabs. Like this. Now I want to create a workflow for Logic App. So how Logic App works? It works on basis of trigger. It needs a trigger to run the workflow. So I'll just go ahead and click edit. I'll create a blank Logic App, and for the starters we'll just select the default trigger that is there. I'll select built-in, just the request when HTTP request is received. Basically, if you'll just click on the run or the play button, it will just start executing. In the next step, connectivity based on HTTP request, right? So we'll select the HTTP request, we'll select HTTP action. Now you can select a method as post. Okay, now to know what and how we can generate a URI for calling the pipeline, we'll follow the documentation of the Microsoft. Okay, and create the request URL. So as you can see, this is the official documentation from Microsoft for connecting to Azure Data Factory or initiating a run or trigger via REST API. So if you see, the service is Data Factory, and there is an API version which is required whenever you are hitting or trying to initiate a service. So as of now, what I'll do, I'll just copy this completely and try to put it in Logic App. So if you see, I have put it. Now this is not required. Now if you see, there are few variables that I need to change. That is the subscription ID, the resource group name, and the data factory name, as well as the pipeline name. So if you remember, we have just created a pipeline with name as test pipeline logic app. I'll quickly update the name. Okay, now I need the data factory name as well. So my data factory name is ADF test instance 01. So I'll update the data factory name here. Okay, now I need the resource group name where the data factory resides. That is the same as for Logic App. I update that as well. Now only thing that remains is the subscription ID. So you can find the subscription ID here from the overview section of the Azure ADF instance. I'll copy it. I'll update the subscription ID as well. So now I think it works. Now you can leave the headers query as it is, since we're not passing any parameters, and it's just initiation of the pipeline. Now here for the authentication, since we know we are trying to connect Logic App with Azure Data Factory using managed identity, so I'll select the authentication. Now I'll get different authentication type. Okay, so for now I'll select managed identity because that is the use case that we are trying to test out. Is it a system managed or a user based? It's a system managed. Audience you can leave as it is, or maybe you can just keep this. Now what I'll do, I'll just save it. So once it is saved, in the meantime what I'll do, I'll check what was the output of the web activity response that we had created. So this was so basically it just did a get call on the GitHub side, and this was the response. So if you can see some GitHub and title and metadata and all, right? So this is just a test pipeline, and we can test. We can go to the monitor pipeline run. Okay. Right now we are not seeing any run, right? So there is no pipeline run that was initiated by any. So now what we'll do, we'll try to initiate the pipeline run, since we have all the configuration needed to hit the data factory from Logic App. We'll try to run the Logic App and see whether we receive any pipeline run here or not. Let's wait for some time. So the trigger was successfully initiated, and if you see, this right arrow in green shows that the connection and the initiation was successful. So firstly we'll see what happened here. So if you see, there was a post call made from Logic App to the URI that we had given. Audience was management.azure.com, and the type was managed service identity. That is currently known as managed identity, and we received a status code of 200, that is success. And in response what we had got is a run ID. So basically whenever we are running a pipeline in Azure Data Factory, there is a unique ID created that is called run ID. Now let's see whether we have got any pipeline runs in the history or not. I'll try to refresh. I'll, yeah. So after refreshing, I was able to see that there was a pipeline run made at 6:15. Let's see if it was the same one that we are seeing. Yeah. So how can we validate whether the pipeline run that we are seeing here is the same or not? So whenever Logic App triggers a pipeline run, in the return we get a run ID. So if you see run ID says DED 43048 something. So we go ahead and check DED 43048 and it ends with 242819E 19E. So as we tested, we are able to securely connect Logic App to Azure Data Factory via managed identity, and there was no need of maintaining any secrets for establishing the connection and initiating the pipeline run, and we are successfully able to see the results as well. Coming back to a live demonstration slide, so what we did, we tested creation of Logic App instance, Data Factory instance, creating a dummy pipeline, establishing a managed identity based access between ADF and Logic App, REST invocation, and finally we tested it. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share.